to one of the cholim, which is Yeshua ben Sarah, because Jeff Kaplan was taken to hospital in an ambulance.
Oh,
So they tried home oxygen, but he's just getting worse and worse, and he really is deteriorating. So
it's COVID again.
yeah, not again, first time. Yeah.
I mean, another COVID. I'm talking about. It's not like anything else yet. It's COVID technically. It's incredible. This COVID. It's scary.
So it's quite serious. So let's also add Kevin's mom.
Shifra Simcha Bat Yeta and Chaim Bat Braina, Ben Braina, and other cholim of Klal Yisrael. Speedy refer Shlema for all.
Amen.
Okay, so continuing with under the Melacha of cooking, the next theme we're going to cover is warming foods. All types of cold food, solid or liquid, may be raised to a lukewarm temperature below 45 degrees C. Okay, I think we've done that. Have we done that? Sorry. No, we have done that. Sorry, apologies. We have done that. Yes, sorry, apologies. Okay, the next one is hot water systems. Okay, hot water systems. This is actually a short one. There are 2 points here. One may not use a hot water faucet or tap if by doing so, cold water entered the system and will be heated to 45 degrees C or above. Even if the boiler had been turned off before Shabbos, cold water entering the cylinder will be heated by its contact with the existing hot water. Although the cold and hot water do not mix in the modern cylinders, there is still a degree of contact between them. And the second point, one may not wash one's face, hands, and feet with hot water, for example, from an urn, provided that the water has been heated before Shabbos. One should not wash one's whole body unless one is daily accustomed to doing so and would feel extreme discomfort without a full wash. Water should not be pressed out from the hair because that's squeezing. Okay, let me just go. I just want to go over that example again. Let me just read this again. One may not wash one's hands, face, and feet with hot water from an urn unless the water had been heated before Shabbos. It says provided. It uses the word provided. It should have used the word unless. Because it's if it's heated on Shabbos, you can't use it. But before Shabbos, it's okay. That's the main issue.
So if you put your urn on before Shabbos, the water is done before Shabbos, you can use that water for bathing in?
Because it's not, if it's already hot, you're not switching on. If it's still hot and it's not being heated.
So basically, once it's boiled, then you should feel the Shabbat clock. Okay.
If you keep it in like a in a
big meal thing,
flask, whatever, that keeps it still in its hot state, then it's cool because it's not in the process of heating.
Okay, so from your urn you can't, but if you put it in a separate thermos flask, let's say. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So long as you're not switched, because if the process and involves the boiler and the geyser, then that's not allowed.
But what about your coffee urner? You know, your coffee thing that has Shabbat thing that like has a constant heat on it, so it doesn't get cold, because it's constantly kept warm, if you want to call it. How you make tea, you know, or coffee.
I'm not sure. I've never used that. I'm not too sure about.
I was just asking. Okay.
Yeah, I don't use one. Main thing is not if things are being cooked and used on Shabbos like hot water. If it's being boiled, the actual boiling is being taken on Shabbos itself. You can't. But on Yom Tov you can. That's a leniency you can.
That's the funny thing with soup, though. Like you can make soup on a Yom Tov, but you can't make it on a Shabbos.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even know that. You know, somebody told me. I said, really? I always thought you can make
as long as the
soup that's boiling. I had it on the you can't boil it before it's left. You can have it that night if you have it supper, but you can't have it the next day warmed up on the blast because it might boil.
But you got to turn the switch on before Yom Tov.
Yeah, we know
before the start of the Chag. That's as long as we know that. That's the main issue.
but you can't reheat soup on a Yom Tov on a blast because it gets to boiling. It's considered cooking. If there's more liquid than there is soup,
No, Yom Tov's different. Yom
Did you
Tov's
not
different.
speak to your Rov to get specific answer? I don't want to give you a...
Damon's my role.
Damon might know. I don't want to give an
All I'm
answer.
saying is the halachas and Yom Tov are different.
Yeah, more lenient.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so we're gonna. For some reason, the cat's just jumped on the table. I tell you something. She can be in the garden the whole day. The minute we start a shear, she knows. I don't know if it's some Gilgul of some blonde.
Maybe she likes you. That's because of Arthur also, Damon.
No,
She sees Arthur's cat in the picture and she likes to...
No, that's not that. What it is
No, it's not you. It's your cat's,
Bava
Arthur.
Kamma pheromone she lets out. You know, it's like, I'm ready for Bava Kamma. She can smell. Oh, Bava Kamma's coming up. We've got to get there. It's so exciting. Let's see if I can jump on the computer.
Okay.
What you put on beforehand, Danny? Damon, before you do this year, because that must be the thing that she knows. Like, put it up in a, you know,
Aftershave.
yeah, like, you know, cat toilet or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're talking a lot of nonsense. Let's just start just now.
You mean we haven't started the heavy stuff yet?
Now let me just get a cat the biscuits just to prepare. Give me a sec.
I thought that was the heavy stuff.
Gavin, what time does the fast start tomorrow morning? Do you know? I'm going to send Aaron Zulberg a message.
Normally
The
about
fast starts. I don't know exactly.
Let me send him a message.
I can tell you what time it starts. You guys are in Joburg? Just look
Yeah.
at you look at the sunrise in Joburg, and it's just before that, basically.
No, it's Aaron will tell me.
Okay.
Tell me as well, Kevin. Tell all of us when you get an answer.
No, I'm sending it to you now.
And I'll work an hour ahead, like our time is the same with the sun and everything.
I've sent him a message. Okay.
Right, guys. Let's get started. I'm just going to stop so I know where to edit. Okay, the recording is presumed. All right, guys, I'm just going to do a little bit of a summary of the 39th daf before we get to the 40th daf, but it will be so super quick, you wouldn't believe. Okay, so bottom line, there's a contradiction between the first and second ruling of the Mishnah. Basically, we don't know because it says if the ox of a deaf, neuter, deranged person or minor, or the ox of a competent person, the owner is exempt. We see that in the case of a tam, the court doesn't appoint an agent to allow the damaged party to collect the half payment damage from the animal's body. In other words, even if the court appointed an agent to watch over the tam ox, the ox and horse, the agent is not empowered to collect the half damages from the body of the animal. But the second clause seems to contradict that in the Mishnah. It says, if the ox of a deaf, mute, deranged person or a minor god, the court appoints for them an agent to watch over the ox. And the court accepts testimony regarding their oxen in the presence of the agent. So we see in the second part of the Mishnah that in the case of the tam, the court does appoint an agent allowing the damaged party to collect the half damage payment from the animal's body. In other words, in this case, the agent is empowered. So the two clauses are contradictory. So this is what Rabba said in the second clause, is that basically the court does appoint for them an agent to watch over the oxen and accepts the testimony regarding the oxen in the presence of an agent. And we render the oxen muad so that if it goes again, there's an obligation to pay from choice property. Okay, that's how it started off. Then there was a second clause that doesn't speak about the empowerment of an agent to allow collection from the body of the tam, but is empowerment with regard to rendering the oxen muad. So we're saying, although the court doesn't authorize him with regard to the former, it authorizes him with regard to the latter, so it doesn't conflict. So the Mishnah rules that we appoint an agent to render the animal a muad. So in other words, to do account. So he's just there to accept testimony. Then basically the Gemara discusses or is it taken from the choice property of an agent? Because Rav Yochanan said it's not taken from the choice property of the orphans, because creditors can't take from orphans movable property. And in the case of Tam, remember, it's the body of an attacking animal, it's movable property. But Rav Yossi Bar Chanina said you can only take from choice property once it becomes muad. So the bottom line of it is that how it works out is it's different in the case of a damager. Why? Because, and by the way, when it says minors, orphans, it's including in minors those that don't have the capacity to have full comprehension of consequence. It's including deaf mutes and deranged people. So we're saying, look, at the end of the day, it's different with regards to damager, because the whole, it means that the laws, people can't just be damaged. It's different if somebody grants a loan and then that person passes away and the kids, when they get older, they have to pay it from movable property. But at the time, you can't take from minors movable property, only from fixed assets. But it's different in the case of a damager, because a damager can't be expected to ruin the public with its damage. And even somebody that doesn't have the capacity to make the decision from whoever's taking care of the animal has to pay from those, the estate or the property of the mental incompetent, because it's damage. It's not as lenient as credit. Then the Gemara goes to the case where it's saying, look, we should actually take from the agent. Why? Because it was the agent who's in whose care in the animal lay. But the reason we don't take from an agent is very simple, is because nobody would volunteer to pay that sort of money and take that responsibility. So basically we get from this that, look, what happened with the agent, I'm hearing a lot of my own voice in the background. I don't know.
I'm hearing a massive noise as well. I'm betting to hear you properly. I thought it was just me.
Can you hear me now? Is there any issue?
No, now it seems much better.
Okay. So bottom line is that we're saying, look, the agent isn't apparently paid big bucks. What happens with the agent is very straightforward. Is the agent basically volunteers. I don't even know if he gets paid or he gets paid minimally. But from what I understand is that the agent is a court-appointed person that takes the tam ox to their jurisdiction. So he says, look, I'm prepared to look after it, maybe just pay for the food or whatever, nothing major, and I'll look after the animal. But if you're asking me to be responsible, cut me out. So the same thing as you go to Australia and you get somebody to look after your property and he's doing you a favor, which is called the unpaid custodian, unpaid guardian. In that case, he's saying, look, I'm looking after your place. If you're going to sue me for everything that goes wrong, get somebody else to look after your place. So that's why we don't make the agent pay. And we're hoping that the agent will feel so bad as causing mental incompetence to lose money that, in fact, he ends up being much more conscious. And maybe that's also one of the reasons that we don't make him empowered to collect from tam damages. Okay, because he's there just to accept looking after the animal and for the muad count. So maybe in that way, we're also giving the people that are mentally incompetent a bit of a chance. Then the Gemara goes on to the next part and says, look, at the end of the day, we're talking about there seems to be an issue. In other words, we're not sure if the question of whether the court appoints an agent in the case of a tam to allow the damaged party to collect the half payment damage from the animal's body is subject to a dispute between the Tanaim. Because we learned in a brisa, remember this, guys, that regarding an oxen whose owners have become deaf and mute, or whose owners have become deranged, or whose owner has gone overseas in ox gored, Yehuda ben Nakusa said in the name of Sumchus, it remains in its tam state, but to Musa, until witnesses testify regarding it in the presence of their owners. But the sages say the court appoints for them an agent, and the court accepts testimony regarding their oxen in the presence of an agent. So what can we see from there so far, guys? We can see that Sumchus says, listen, Akiva's joined us. We'll just let him in, guys. Hi, Akivs. How's it, mate? Akiva,
Yeah.
how are you?
Yeah.
Good. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank God. Good to see you guys too.
Good.
So at least on a Motzei Shabbos, I should try and join you.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Guys, remember him. We recognize him. He looks familiar. Doesn't he look familiar? We're just ragging you, but basically we're just talking in the Gemara of a case where Sumchus doesn't agree that the court appoints the agent to act with the powers to collect time damages, but the sages say that that's not true. The court agent has the power to collect time damages because that agent is the custodian of the animal, because mentally incompetent people can't look after the animal. So that's the argument between the sages and Sumchus. We're just doing a bit of a review, kids.
Okay, no problem. I'll just follow along.
Yeah, okay. So there's a second ruling. So if the deaf-mute regains hearing and speech, or the deranged person becomes sane, or the minor becomes an adult, the ox is basically or the owner comes back from overseas. Yehuda ben Nakusa said in the name of Sumchus, it returns to its tam state until witnesses testify about it in the presence of the owners. But Rav Yossi said it remains in its present muad state. So what's the contradiction, guys, we learned? We said, but hang on a second. Sumchus is saying, but to Muso, implying that it stays in its tam state. And basically here, it's saying that Yehuda ben Nakusa said in the name of Sumchus, it returns to its tam state, which means if it returns to its tam state, it means it was muad, while it was goring in the presence of the agent. But now that the original owners have either come back from overseas or have developed their mental faculties, it goes back to a tam state. So we're saying something's wrong here. So the Gemara wants to say that but Musa doesn't mean that it stayed in the tam state and never became muad. It just means that it remains but Musa in terms of law. In other words, it remains tam in its entirety. In other words, entirely the property of the damager. So we're saying that, look, the court-appointed agent, according to Sumchus, firstly, has the power to look after the animal and to just do a muad count. But he does not have the power to make sure that any payments are made while it's in its tam state. So at the end of the day, we don't reduce the ownership by paying half payment damages from the body for the first 3 times. We see that Sumchus holds that in the case of a tam, the court does not appoint an agent to allow the damaged party to collect half damage payment from the animal's body. What do the sages say, guys? Guys, what do they say? How do they feel? Guys, you can unmute yourselves. Guys?
I'm the only one that's on mute. Everyone else can talk.
Yeah, I don't understand why nobody's saying anything.
Because we don't know.
So
All right.
fun.
Look, guys, very simple. The sages say there's 2 different disputes. Sumchus already said, listen, the agent of the court can only do 2 things, is to look after the animal on behalf of mental incompetence and to make sure there's a count where the animal, in fact, becomes muad, okay? But there's no tam damages that pays while it's in the care of the mental incompetence. And even if it becomes muad through the court agent, it reverts back to tam in the minute they gain their faculties. The sages turn around and say, of which Rav Yehuda, by the way, agrees, as well as Rav Yaakov agrees with the sages, that says, look, the court appoints an agent to collect for tam payments as well. There's no question as far as that's concerned. Okay. Then we go into the next section that discusses, look, there seems to be a separate issue, okay? And that issue is about domain jurisdictional issues. So Sumchus holds that basically coming under a new domain renders the ox from a muad state to a tam state, okay? And Rabbi Yossi said, no, it stays exactly in the state that it was. It stays in a muad state. Does that make sense, guys? And the sages also agree with that, many of the sages. All right, guys, just give me 1 second. I'm just trying to get this cat off this laptop. Just give me a sec.
Okay, you're not going for a run tomorrow then?
No, it's a fast day.
So why should you go slow then if it's a fast day?
Arthur.
Are we going? Right, guys, I'm back. All right. So then basically, Rav Yossi holds that a new jurisdiction doesn't alter the status. Sumchus said it does. The animal goes back to being tam. Why does it come back to being tam? Do you remember the answer?
Because it's in a new jurisdiction, so it's going back to where it came from, and it's not really fair on that on the original owner that these guys that are incapacitated or retarded or whatever the issues are. It's not fair for them to inherit an animal now all of a sudden that they've got their mental faculties together to inherit an animal that is muad.
Correct. Because they said, listen, while we were mentally incompetent or overseas, you were meant to do a decent job of looking after it. Now I've got to pay muad payment because you did a worse job than I could have done. Had it been under my care and I'd been retarded because I was in a slightly deranged state or whatever, it would have become muad anyway. Now it became muad under your care. What difference? Why were you even there? Exactly, Kevin. That's exactly the point.
And he was in all probability negligent. That's how it became muad. If you did a secure guarding on a on a tam animal, then this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, you're saying the same thing, but absolutely, you're absolutely correct.
Just adding, I thought I left it out. Sorry.
Rav Yossi holds that the new jurisdiction doesn't alter its status. Okay, so in terms of why. Because if you're the person that was damaged, okay, you could say, look, why should I accept half payment damages now? That's your internal issue. That's between the courts and the mentally incompetent. What does it have to do with me as an innocent bystander? So you can see it from Rav Yossi's point of view as well. Sure. I think in the point in the Gemara is trying to see it from 2 points of view. All right, just a summary now, we're nearly done. But now we've got a problem. Because Rav Yaakov pops in the equation and he says, Rav Yaakov pays half damages. Gemara says, what are you talking about? Rav Yaakov pays the damages. The Gemara said, no, that's not the wording. What we're saying is Rav Yaakov says that the owner pays half damages. So the Gemara says, well, we can't be dealing with a case of tam. Why can't we be dealing with a case of tam? Very simple. It's because if you say half damages and it's a case of tam, we've learned this in virtually every daf. I mean, what are you telling us something new here? It has to be something novel. So you can't be telling us the obvious. So it's saying, look, it's not obvious. So it's talking about a case of muad. So we're saying, hang on, with the case of muad, this doesn't even make sense. In muad, there's 2 points. If you looked after the animal successfully well and did a super superior guarding on it, and you did a normal looking after of the animal, and at the end of the day, the animal gored, it's because, for example, either that the animal in other words, somebody, Kibbutz, let me put it to you like this, because you weren't there. Say you looked after the animal super well. It's a muad animal, technically, but you locked it up, lock and key and everything else. Then at the end of the day, some thieves came in and broke into the house and let the animal out and robbed things. That's an unavoidable accident. So for muad, then you'd pay nothing, because it's not your fault. Yeah. If you fail to look after the animal, you owe full payment damages. It's not half damages. What are we talking about? So we learned for the first time that there's this concept, okay? And I'm going to teach us.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay. So for first Shlema for what's the name,
Um,
Damon?
For Jeff Kaplan, for Yeshua Ben Sarah,
And for Margalit also, and for Shifra
Yeah.
Simcha Batit and all Cholim. All Cholim.
Right.
Okay.
name.
Okay, warming. Okay, we've done that. So okay. Okay, washing dishes and preparation. This is going to be a very quick one. Okay. In accordance with the above principles, one may not pour hot water directly from a kettle or urn onto dirty dishes, but one may pour the hot water into a dry dishpan into which the dishes can then be placed. Absorbent materials may not be used to wash the dishes. Dirty dishes may be put into a dishwasher even though the machine may not be activated until Motzei Shabbos. One should not arrange the dishes in the exact position for the wash. If one uses the machine to store the dishes, it is advisable to disconnect the plug before Shabbos. Washing dishes is permitted if the utensils are intended to be used again during Shabbos. It is permitted also in order to avoid attracting flies or the buildup of smells during the day. However, otherwise dishes may not be washed, since preparation on Shabbos for a weekday is prohibited to preserve the dignity of the day. Although preparation is prohibited, certain routine activities which require only minimal effort may be carried out, provided that it is not verbally specified that they are in preparation for the next day. For example, one may return a book to itself or put food in the fridge. So basically, if you're going to wash a dish on Friday night and not use it again on Shabbos and only use it again on Motzei Shabbos, you can't wash it. You can just put like water in it so you don't want flies or that or dirt if it bothers you. But basically, that's what they're also saying here.
Good. And on the same note, never air your dirty laundry in public.
Yeah.
That means something else. All right. So, Kev, thank you. That actually was very informative. Thank you, mate. Okay.
Kev, you're ruining my life. So many things I used to do, now I can't do them anymore.
I hope that washed with you, Arthur. Did that wash with you or didn't wash with you?
I feel totally drowned by your information.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm swimming in your information. How does that sound?
Okay, guys, let's get started because it's going to help.
You doing Derech Hashem or are you going straight into the shiur?
Now, listen, we don't have a lot of time. I'm actually going to go straight into the shiur.
You can still send another link. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. So listen, we're on 48.2. Okay. And the Gemara cites a brisa. The rabbis taught in a brisa, agents pay from choice property. In other words, they pay if the animal inflicts damage. But if an animal kills a person, they do not pay kofar. Okay. So basically, the Gemara assumes that an agent doesn't pay kofar because the purpose of kofar is to atone for the animal's owner. And minors or mentally incompetent people need no atonement. So before the Gemara seeks to identify the Tana that takes this view, there should be a question that you guys have. Okay. Again, the agents pay from choice property if it's muad, or obviously if it's half payment from the attacking animal, if the animal does damage, but there's no kofar payment if the animal kills a person. But the logic is that basically the agent of the court represents those that are mentally incompetent. And we know that minors need not pay any atonement for looking after one's animal. It's clear with a minor, that's mafurish, that's straightforward, but we assume that's the same for those that are also not able to see consequence of decision. But there should be a question you guys are asking here. What should be the question?
I've got one else. Can I ask the question? But I'll
Please
make
do,
a comment, an observation. So the observation, you want to go, Kevin?
The kofar payment is a debate involving the kofar payment.
Yeah, but what would be your question on already in the Gemara here? Because there should be a very, very startling question.
There should be a kofar payment for that offense, for that.
Why?
Because a person was murdered, was killed by the ox. And isn't that the standard?
Okay, and what is the Gemara's reasoning that the agent of the court does not make a kofar payment? What did I just say in terms of the reasoning?
Because of the persons are not of mental capacity, they don't know, and they're not liable. They're not. So
Okay.
if the ox had killed a human, then there's no liability. But if it's a person of normal capacity or who's not mentally handicapped or challenged, then it would be a kofar payment.
Okay, and go on with that train of thought. So therefore, what's the problem, guys? Anybody want to suggest?
Okay, yeah, so I'll go for it. So the basic problem we have here is that a kofar payment is an atonement payment. So
Yes.
the agent hasn't atoned for anything. What's he done wrong, really? It's not his animal. Sorry, he can't atone for somebody else's. Seeing that he's not the owner of the animal, only the owner can atone for his own property. So the owner in these particular cases are all either mentally incompetent, they aren't able to, they aren't competent, put it this way. So because of the fact they're not competent, there can't be a kofar payment because the kofar is to make up for the fact that a person was killed by an ox, by the ox that belonged to one of those people. Normally the kofar is, instead of that guy's life having to be taken away from him, a kofar payment is made as an atonement for him having to otherwise have lost his life. So that's basically where the problem comes in, because he's a third party agent. So it makes sense that he doesn't have to pay kofar. It does actually make sense there.
Okay,
That the agent doesn't have to pay kofar because the agent's not the owner.
Okay, can I put a question to you?
Sure.
Say I borrow a firearm from you, Gav, and I leave it on my kitchen table, and some kids from the neighborhood come around and play cops and robbers, and they get well ventilated because they don't realize it's not a real gun. Now, I turn around when the parents come and question me and say, but it's not my gun, it's Gavin's gun. Should I have put the gun away, being the custodian of that gun? How does it exonerate even if it's not mine, if I was lax in regards to its care?
Well, it depends how you look at it. So there are two different opinions. That one, that the kofar payment is an atonement, and some people look at it as a compensation payment.
Okay, but before we even deal with as far as that's concerned, let's just take it either way, because it's basically in a way the same sort of issue. It's stronger with the kofar, but it's the same with the compensation. We learned that the agent that was negligent should in fact pay for that negligence because it caused the loss when the ox damaged, never mind killed. And it's just that people wouldn't volunteer as an agent if they'd have to lose their back shirt in order to provide almost a free or very low paying service of looking after the animal. But by rights, they should pay, even if it hadn't killed anybody. Kal v'chomer, even more so. What does it have to do with the fact that they're mentally incompetent people of whom you looking after the animal on their behalf? Obviously, they don't have the faculty to see consequence, which is why you, as a mentally competent person, were designated as a caregiver. And therefore, by being designated as a caregiver, you're the one that should be having to pay kofar. You're the one that were negligent.
Okay, so you can look at it from that perspective as well. So that's the problem that you've got. I don't think it's a kofar payment from all the readings that I did, but I can't back it up. I'll wait till you go through it properly because I can't remember it in detail,
Quick question.
to the finest degree.
Is it not
But
the
I
intention behind
understand the
that?
fact. Go ahead.
I'm ahead of my game. Is that have I gone too far?
Sorry, Alf, what were you going to say?
Not the intention as well, not just the what's the intention
Okay.
of.
There's a separate issue for intention. It's obviously any sort of thing that has intent has a worse sort of penalty. But still, leaving Gavin's given me his firearm to put in my safe. I've gone to a nursery school and I've gone to do some signage there, and I left the gun while I'm busy installing the sign. I left my gun on the counter, went to the loo, and came back, and havoc ensued. What is it? Even though my intention wasn't this sort of consequence, how does it remove the atonement of the fact that I was absolutely irresponsible with this gun? I never shot the kids point blank. Yes, I agree. That would get the death penalty. I agree. Kofir is when your property does damage, or that is a factor. But the point of it is, my discussion with the Gemara, and it's an issue the Gemara does raise in the commentaries, is that what are you giving a reason for that the mentally incompetent people in minor are not responsible for thinking of consequence of action? They never caused the damage. The custodian that was selected was mentally competent, and he should be making a kofir payment.
So have we learned? Can I ask you 1 second, David?
Sure.
Have we learned in the past, because my memory is not as good as yours, I don't think any of ours are. Have we learned in the past that a kofir payment is that you don't have to pay, that a custodian has to pay kofir payment? You remember when we did that custodian thing? If you're looking after somebody's property while they're away, all those things, was there a kofir payment involved? Well, we never covered death there. That's the difference.
We never covered death there at all. We just covered men. Listen, this is not the main point of the Gemara. It's just something that bugged me that I want you guys to think about in all logic. Think about it in terms of a secular court and if it would hold water. That's all I want you to think about. I'm going to go through.
So what's the outcome? What's it? So why is it like that? I mean, why you saying it should be the third party custodian should pay kofir? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing if you turn around and say, listen, I can understand the logic in Gavin's first point where he's saying, listen, if tam is considered a knas, which is a penalty by some, and a mammon, a compensation by others, or the full payment is a mammon, which is compensation. Let's just take the term of the tam aspect. If we say that the tam is either knas or it's a mammon or compensation, there is an argument, and the bottom line is the agent doesn't have to pay just simply because otherwise no one would volunteer to be an agent to do that good deed, because I assume the reason why the agent gets paid hardly anything or he doesn't get paid except for the food of the animal has to be by logic. Why? If you had one cow, it's like storing furniture and rental. You're going to pay more for the rental at Renter Store or any of these places than eventually what the article is worth. It's a timeline. So if your article is worth 8,000 Rand, Kevin, and you're storing it, and you're paying 800 Rand a month to store, after 10 months, you might as well have bought another article. If you've got one ox, but you're paying a custodian a lot of money to look after it, then at the end of the day, after a certain period of time, it should have been a burger and chips. So and they should have shared the thing. So the thing of it is, it's different when you have a farmhand and he's looking under 200 herd of cattle, because then it makes sense, because that's an industrial business. That's not an inheritance of Betsy the cow. It's very different. So this person had to have joined on for next to nothing. Okay. And if you make him liable for the payment, nobody's going to volunteer. It's not exactly like military conscription, where the guy has to do his court-appointed duty to look after the animal. Yeah, it was obviously voluntary. If I ran a dictatorship, I'd say, listen, your numbers come up, guess what? You can either do army duty or look after this animal. Oh, guess what? If it damages, you pay. Look after it. These people are mentally incompetent. Let's hope you don't have to cost you money. But apparently this was a volunteering proposition. I don't understand, by the way, why it was a volunteering position. It should be that part of your community service. If you've got the space for it, providing you're not paying for the food, you have to do it anyway. But it's probably that they paid for the food of the animal, but nothing more, which is why the agent can't be responsible in their personal capacity. Because otherwise no one would volunteer. I wouldn't make it voluntarily. I'd make it conscription based. You see what I'm saying, Gab? I'm just saying that the guy, and I'd say if you don't look after it, you pay. Just like everybody has to do like their civil public duty. But since this person volunteered, there's an argument between the Tanaim whether you make the agent pay or not, which means the agent is responsible. You just don't have a lot of volunteers because based on the rule of the custodian, as we learned, what was that rule of the custodian? The more of a favor you're doing for the person, okay?
Yeah.
The more of a favor, the less that you're obligated, because the guy would say, listen, you're going to Australia, I'm looking after your stuff, you're not paying me. If you're going to hold me responsible, just get somebody else to do it. That's the logic. Okay, so the thing of it is, I could say Gavin's right in that respect with regards to even if compensation's dropped for that reason, but you've killed, not you, God forbid, the agent of the court has killed somebody here. This is not about a monetary payment. This is the death of another Jew. This is a very serious offense based on negligence. So, in other words, I would have a rule saying, this is just in Damon land, you know, where the French and the Iranians would be the first to work in labor camps. But this is in my head. The first thing I would say is, listen, even if we don't make you pay for some of the damages, in my brain, Gavin, I would make the agent pay definitely for coffee because it's a favor to him. According to the one payment, where it's a favor to the person that they get spiritually exonerated and they don't have to have a consequence at the hands of heaven to the same degree. You're doing the agent a favor. Okay?
Yeah, it's a good point there.
And if you want to hold that that's not the case, what I'm saying is if you want to hold it's an atonement, that's fine. If you want to hold it's compensation, deprive the person of a breadwinner and their family member killed someone. So in a particular case, you should be financially responsible, whether you volunteered for it or not. That's just all I want you guys. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not suggesting I'm right. I'm just saying, just kindly think of that as a point. Let's go into the Gemara straightforwardly. Okay, so, all right. So the rabbis taught, okay, so who's the Tana who holds coffee payment is an atonement? And since minor orphans need no atonement, their agent is exempt from paying coffee. Rav Chisda said it is Rav Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan ben Baroka. It says here, for it has been taught in a brisa when the verse states regarding the coffee payment, and he, the owner of the ox that killed, shall give a ransom for his life. The brisa refers to the monetary value of the damaged party, but Rav Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan ben Baroka, says it refers to the monetary value of the damager, the owner of the ox. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I added words to this Gemara. Why? Because when you read the Schottenstein translation, it's confusing. It seems like it's quoting Rav Yishmael on two contradictory opinions. You have to put the word but in. Okay, trust me. If you read the notes, yeah. The notes don't say it. I'm saying it. That if you read the statement, it doesn't clearly state what's the brisa in him. So that's why I added in my own wording there. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to share my screen, guys. Just give me a second. I drew a little diagram, which is pretty easy. So the calculation on coffee, you have the rabbi's opinion, I need to add an S, I'm sorry, guys, which basically say calculation on kofar is the value of the victim. Rav Yishmael, son of Rav Chanan ben Baruch, said the value is on the owner of the ox that killed. Okay? Now, when you're reading this, what can you deduce here? If we want to say that perhaps it's an issue of compensation, as Gavin was saying, just by logic, we would say the rabbis, it would seem to imply that it's the value of the victim's life, then it must be compensation. Why? He had a brother that looked after the family, and over there, apart from actual damage you pay for the value of the victim, it would sound like it's compensation. Would it not, guys?
Yeah.
According to the rabbis.
And the second one doesn't sound like compensation. It sounds more like
Correct. The opinion of Rav Yishmael, son of Rav Yochanan ben Baruch, seems that if you that it's about atonement because it's based on the owner of the ox that killed, and it's valued on his life. Why? Because he should pay with his life. Meaning, if after his animal never killed, but he killed, he would lose his life in the death penalty. But in Shemaim, they hold him responsible. So therefore, they give him a hefty fee where he's almost wish he was dead. You get what I'm saying? So that provides some sort of an atonement. Okay. So that's how the opinion would seem when you're looking at it in first glance. Quickly read the Gemara. So it says, do they not disagree regarding the following point, that the rabbis, in other words, the Bava Kamma, which is the anonymous opinion of the Brisa, which implies all the general rabbinic agreement, holds that kofar is compensatory payment, like damages, therefore based on the value of the damaged party. But Rav Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan ben Baruch, holds that kofar is an atonement payment. He therefore bases it on the value of the one responsible for the damage, the owner of the ox. Obviously, let me just give you the reason is that if you have a look on Exodus chapter 21, verse 29, you will obviously see, as far as that's concerned, that they hold him liable and that he ransoms himself, basically. In other words, the kofar payment, according to that opinion, he deserves death penalty at the hands of heaven. So by paying his own work, he basically ransoms himself and is granted continued life in Shemaim, or another opportunity to make teshuvah. Now, if you make the kofar payment, but you don't have teshuvah in your heart, do you think that you would be forgiven in the hands of Shemaim?
Never.
Okay, definitely not. So I'm going to share my screen. And by the way, do you think if somebody gets the death penalty and they lose their life for murdering, if they have no remorse, do you think Hashem would forgive them?
Never.
No. Kev, are you awake? Okay, hopefully. Okay, let me share my screen.
Okay.
All right. So look, guys, it says in Shmot, Exodus chapter 21, verse 29, if, however, that ox has been in the habit of goring and its owner, though warned, has failed to guard it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned and its owner too shall be put to death. Okay? And then verse 30, if ransom is laid upon him, well, that's just great timing. If ransom is laid upon him, he must pay whatever is laid upon him to redeem his life. That's the source for the kofar payment. Now, we must know that if it's the reason why it talks about in the beginning of this stuff, does the agent pay from choice property? You know why the agent must pay from choice property? Because the kofar payment, according to most rabbis, is only due for a muad ox. Why? Because, say, for example, Arthur, let me just give you two cases. There's a gun resting on the table, but it has no bullets in. Okay? And then somebody realized that that particular gun has bullets in, there's a different level of accountability. A moored ox is like a gun with bullets. This ox is dangerous. It's been warned. It's a habitual gorer. It's aggressive, etc. The owner has to take proper care. If the animal is never injured in its life and suddenly it looks as a kid with red hair and it takes a nasty turn for the worse because it just doesn't like this kid, it's not expected if it's had a good track record. So therefore, Kofir, in one opinion, says, I think it's Rabbi Tarfon, I'm not sure, I need to check, is that I think in that case you pay half payment damages for Kofir, for Tam, but the majority of the rabbis say there's no Kofir payment for Tam because the animal never had that habitual aggressive nature. So that's why in the beginning of this, what do you call it, this Gemara, it turns around and says, well, guess what? If the agent did the damage, he pays from choice property because kofir is from a muad ox. Okay, so exactly as we said, is this an argument with regards? What do you call it? Is it atonement for the owner, or is it for compensation on the value of the life that was lost? Okay, so the Gemara wants to propose something. It's saying maybe that the rabbis turn around and say it's compensation for the family because it's based on the victim to pay back what the family lost in terms of a breadwinner and for emotional damage, etc., etc. While Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan ben Barucha, holds that we assess the amount of atonement according to the value of the damager. So therefore, it would seem that if it's based on the value of the damager or the owner of the ox, it's then an atonement for him, not compensation for the family. That's what the Gemara is proposing. So what's the answer? Well, Rav Papa said, look, that's not the issue here. Everybody agrees that kofir is an atonement. And here in the Brisa, they disagree regarding the following point. The rabbis hold that we assess the amount of the atonement according to the value of the damaged party, while Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan ben Barucha, holds that we assess the amount of atonement according to the value of the damager. It's not only Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan ben Barucha, who holds that kofir is an atonement. The rabbis also take this view. So the Gemara, well, firstly, Gavin and I, and Arthur, I'm sure, and Kevin, is also of the view that it seems more like if you're paying on the owner of the ox, it seems more atonement based. So what would be the logic to base it on the victim? Now, why do we call him a victim and not the murdered one if he's dead? Because we only call somebody technically murdered. We call him the damaged, actually. We actually call him the damaged. Is because he's not damaged, he's permanently damaged. The reason why we call him damaged is because you only call it a murdered if it gets a reciprocal death penalty. So if a person murders somebody else, it's somebody that's murdered and a murderer. They get the death penalty. In this case, the Gemara's term is the damaged because we're dealing with financial compensation. The person doesn't need to get the physical death penalty. So, all right, the Gemara elaborates what's the reason of the rabbis is as follows. Is they say there's the word imposition is stated in the verse, okay, that details the kofir obligation, and imposition is stated above in the verse that discusses the payment for causing a pregnant woman to miscarry, okay? Because just as there in the case of miscarriage, the assessment is based on the value of the damaged party, in other words, the fetus. So too here in the case of kofir, the assessment is based on the value of the damaged party. I'm going to share my screen to show you this.
Can I just add something that which I found interesting? I can't remember the exact result. You're going to tell us as we go along now. Is I would think that it's much easier to determine kofir based on the damaged party. What's your worth? If the kofir atonement is for you, how do you value yourself? Whereby the damage...
That's a very good point, and I'll tell you what it's based on. It's based on what the owner of the ox is valued on the slave market.
That's right. Sorry, thank you, Damon. Sorry, I forgot about that. Thank you. All right, you clarify.
Sure, and they both assess the same value. Otherwise, if we ended up killing a neurosurgeon, we would absolutely brick ourselves because
That's
we'd never stop paying.
So you stay at home and you.
In other
you're
words,
the
you
owner.
can't have what?
Go ahead. Sorry, Damon. Go ahead.
So I'm saying, Gav, either way, you see, the thing of it is if it's based and the victim is a neurosurgeon and the other case is a gardener, it's like if you hit a neurosurgeon, it's like hitting a Porsche. You never stop paying. So it has to be based on something relatively doable, affordable. But whether it's the victim or whether it's the owner of the attacking ox, it's both their value on the slave market.
Yeah, I forgot that point. That's a good point. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
I just want to share a screen and then show you where it's based. All right, so guys, look here in Shmot chapter 21, verse 22. It says, when men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according to as the woman's husband may exact from him, the payment to be based on a reckoning. Now, on the 29th, there's a Gezerah Shabbat. On the 29th verse, okay, if, however, the ox has been in the habit of goring and its owner, though warned, has failed to guard it and kills a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned and its owner too shall be put to death. If ransom is laid upon him, he must pay whatever is laid upon him to redeem his life. So the Hebrew word that's used is actually translated, not in the Sepharia, but in the Stone edition Chumash, as imposition. It uses an imposition for both words, both in terms of the woman who lost her baby, her fetus, as well as the owner of the ox that damages. So by having that word Gezerah Shavah twice, we know that it's just like when a woman loses her fetus, it's paid on the value based on the fetal rate, because it's a different rate to a full earning breadwinner, etc. So too, it's based on the victim's rate. Okay? That's where the Gezerah Shavah, that's how the rabbis get it. So what do we do? How come Rav Yishmael, the son of Rav Yochanan, Ben Baruch, doesn't see it like that? He said, because the verse says, and he shall give a ransom for his life, meaning his refers back to the verse's subject, the owner of the ox. So this indicates that the payment is based on his value, but the rabbis actually agree with it. He said, it's true that, however, we assess the amount of atonement based on the value of the damaged party. They say it's true that his is the subject of the owner of the ox, but they still hold by the Gezerah Shavah, and he doesn't. He said it's based on the owner of the ox. They agree with him. It's the in terms of the subject context, but they still say we hold by the Gezerah Shavah. All right, we can finish off on this note. Does it all make sense? I've kept it as simple as possible.
Yeah, I'm good now. I had just that one or two little issues. Thank you.
And Kevin had a power nap.
Less than that, and I'm going to go over it again. I'm going to read over the notes again.
No problem. Listen, I'm going to send you the video. Lovely to see you guys. And
I think we should have the shurim at 1 o'clock in the morning, because like most of us fall asleep to it. So it'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, it's true.
You put so much effort into it. But
it's true. It's lovely to see you guys. I'll send you the
I'm going to do a
link.
link for another 10 minutes, Damon.
Just quickly.
No, we're done.
How's what's his name? Kaplan. Jeff.
About the same.
Sure, that's not good.